Hello everyone, we are today at the Panzermuseum Munster and we look at a German document from August 1943 around what the Grenadier must know about the Sturmgeschütz.
First off, we need to clarify what a Grenadier is in this context. This does not refer to the Panzergrenadier, but to the regular riflemen, since they were renamed in the course of the war. To quote from our second book, StuG, which is currently on sale, Grenadier. The name Grenadier dates back to the 17th century when this type of troops used grenades similar in use to today's hand grenades by throwing them. At the time of Frederick the Great, only specially selected soldiers were organized into grenadier battalions. These soldiers distinguished themselves by being particularly reliable and aggressive. In the Second World War, this term was used more frequently. First, in July 1942, the motorized riflemen were renamed to Panzergrenadiere, and then in October 1942, all regular infantry regiments were renamed to Grenadier regiments. Note, the book contains the German original text on one page and the English translation on the next page, so side by side. But back to 1943. At the same time, the Sturmgeschütz became more regular on the battlefield. In 1943, about 3,000 StuG 3 and 200 Sturmhaubitzen with the 105mm gun were produced. To put this in context, this is approximately the same number as Panzers that were used during Operation Barbarossa in June 1941, with about 3,366. Yet the Sturmgeschütze were deployed mostly in independent units. This was in contrast to Manstein's memo from June 1936. Here he noted that the Sturmgeschütze should be organic to the infantry divisions, and each division should have a battalion of 18 StuGs. In that way, the Sturmgeschütze would be organic to the division, and so other arms, particularly the infantry, could train with them. This would provide both the infantry and the Sturmgeschütze with a mutual understanding. Yet in 1943 this was not the case. Sturmgeschütze became more regular on the battlefield, but their units were not organic to regular infantry divisions. They might be attached for a while or sent as support, but that was not enough to learn the in and outs of each other. Overall, coordination between different arms was and is always a challenge, particularly between two arms that are fundamentally different, like infantry and armored vehicles. This becomes more obvious if you look at some of the fundamental characteristics. The infantryman is very vulnerable in contrast to the StuG. One stray round or one fragment and he's wounded or even outright killed. Meanwhile, a StuG won't even shrug if a few hundred machine gun rounds hits the frontal or even side armor. Yet the StuG is kinda blind, comparatively large and a cumbersome vehicle. An infantryman can dash forward a few meters and jump into cover in a small ditch. Meanwhile, the StuG is exposed and can't do evasive maneuvers, and cover is very limited in contrast. Now, before we dive in, if you want to learn how the StuG battery operated, be sure to check out my translation of the training, employment and command of the assault gun battery from 1942. There's currently a 20% discount from 13th July to 2nd of August and 15% on all our other books. The book has about 200 pages. It is a translation of the complete Army Regulation 200/2M with additional documents, including Manstein's original memorandum to the General Staff, and its answer. Additionally, there's a glossary that explains all the key terminology. If you want the full StuG live experience, you can also get the German version with the flags. The pages of the documents of the English and German version are at the same position, so you can do a side-by-side comparison. Get the books on militaryhistorygroup.com. See also the link in the description. During the translation I found several errors in the German edition, so I released a second corrected edition. If you own the first edition, you can find the errata linked in the description with the corrections. Now back to what the Grenadier must need to know. Since we got the general context set, let us look at the 17 points that the Grenadier must know about the Sturmgeschütz. Keep in mind it starts off with the obvious. Assault guns are armored tracked infantry support guns that can follow infantry almost everywhere on flat and hilly terrain. In mountains, ravine-rich terrain, forests and swamps, their employment is limited or impossible. I don't think I need to add context here, so the next point. Assault guns fire only in the direction of travel, and while stationary, observation from them is difficult. The Grenadier must frequently designate important targets to the assault artillery men via signal flares, via radio through the assault artillery liaison non-commissioned officer, or direct to the gun commander, who sits on the left in the direction of travel. The liaison NCO is covered specifically in the assault gun battery manual. The liaison NCO, a non-commissioned officer with a particular good tactical training, acts as a representative of the battery commander and officer on special assignment or platoon leader in their absence when dealing with the infantry commander. He worked with battery commanders or platoon leaders to communicate with the infantry. Furthermore, it is noted, tactical intuition and a good knowledge of the capabilities of his weapon enable him to make suggestions to the infantry commander regarding the employment of the battery or platoon. Which brings us to the next point. The assault gun engages single targets. It suppresses the enemy but cannot hold them down for long periods. The Grenadier must immediately exploit the fire of the assault guns and occupy the suppressed nest. This directly relates to the German view about Stoßkraft and Feuerkraft, translated as shock action and firepower. To quote the glossary of our Sturmzug book, the shock action describes the protruding force of an attack and was defined by Rath as shock action, on the other hand, meant the impulse of the attack carried forward by the momentum of the soldiers in the assault, which was ultimately intended to throw the enemy from the position to be conquered. So the Sturmgeschütz provides firepower while the infantry provides shock action. Speaking of firepower, shooting is conducted with direct fire. The assault gun can only engage targets that are visible. The primary firing ranges are between 200 to 1000 meters. This is directly related to the next point about engaging tanks. Assault guns are capable of defeating all current appearing tanks from a favorable firing position up to a firing range of 800 to 1000 meters. So to the next point. Assault guns are vulnerable on their flanks due to their weak side armor. They advance with the lead elements of the infantry. Special attention must be paid to flanking enemy weapons during employment. The Grenadier must protect the flank at the level of the assault guns. Well, nothing to add here. Assault guns attack using alternate bounds, literally overlapping employment. They never stay in one firing position for long, but often move back and forth to change positions. The assault gun can only carry a certain amount of ammunition and must therefore drive back to a covered position to reload. This refers to the movement technique generally called bounding overwatch, which has two subtypes, alternate bounds and successive bounds. Successive bounds mean that after the previously overwatching unit moves up to the other unit but doesn't move past it. Meanwhile, for alternate bounds, it means that the previously overwatching unit will pass. Also keep in mind that it was specifically mentioned that the Sturmgeschütz might leave to resupply ammunition. This was done that the infantry was informed that sometimes the Sturmgeschütz will leave the battlefield. Particularly in late war, there were some problems with infantry not moving forward if not an armored vehicle was nearby. Speaking of moving forward, assault guns are sensitive to mines, therefore engineers must accompany the attack and clear mine lanes. This might seem obvious to you, but keep in mind, if you're an infantryman looking at these tracks, you might think the mines can't do much. The next point is similar. Assault guns are not capable of carrying out independent reconnaissance missions alone. Protection by infantry is always required. I've seen quite a few reports where armored fighting vehicles were basically left alone and suffered unnecessary losses. One is covered in my video about the Jagdpanzer 38, generally called the Hetzer, which also has a report about night operations. Speaking of which, night operations are only conditionally possible for assault guns on bright nights. The night belongs to the maintenance crews for repairing the vehicles, selecting and potentially moving into assembly areas. Generally, operating during the night makes everything more difficult and dangerous. Vehicles get stuck easier, accidents are more likely. Keep in mind, in a StuG you're almost blind during the day and also deaf. At night, you're basically blind and deaf. Next is the combat unit, it's the assault gun battery. The effectiveness of the assault guns is only fully utilized if dividing the battery into platoons or the individual guns is avoided. Employment of the whole battalion should be the goal. I think this is kind of funny because I've read such and similar lines in pretty much every German regulation. At the same time, I read various complaints that it wasn't done. So why tell the individual infantryman about this when it is clearly an issue of the leadership and commanders? Well, Also, finding a meaningful translation of geschlossener Einsatz drove me nuts years ago, and it still bugs me to this day. I wrote 2 pages in the Sturmzug book on the whole ordeal, and the solution is still kinda meh. Anyway, next point. After reaching the objective, assault guns cannot remain in the main line of resistance, but instead drive back to be able to repel enemy hasty counterattacks from suitable firing positions. This makes more sense, since that basically tells every rifleman if the StuG leaves, this does not mean they are gone. They still might have your back, similar to the resupply situation. Note that the Germans distinguish between hasty counterattacks and counterattacks. The first one were done immediately for local forces, whereas the later ones were general with preparation and/or additional units. In defense, the assault gun is used for hasty counterattacks or counterattacks and not as a fixed-in, dug-in weapon. This again provides context for the infantryman, while the StuG might not dig in and hang around the soldiers. Now, for the next point, keep in mind this document was translated into Russian by the Red Army. Now you wonder why I mention this now? Well, I guess this is just a coincidence. Carrying infantry on assault guns is only appropriate during pursuit. It would lead to massive casualties during attack against an entrenched enemy determined to resist. Well, no comment from my side here. Before we cover the last 3 points, a short reminder, don't forget that from 13th July to 2nd August there's a 20% discount on the Assault Gun Battery book and 15% on all the other books. But back to the Grenadier, this point is about the antenna. Telephone lines on the approach routes of assault guns must be raised or buried, height 3.5 meters. This is most likely related to the fact that the riflemen keep an eye out for dangerous situations. The next point is more related to don't ride on the StuG one. The Grenadier must not seek cover behind assault guns as they attract enemy fire as a prominent target. I find this particularly interesting since there are still photos shared from training exercises nowadays where infantry is bunched up behind vehicles, and I remember a Ukraine veteran stating that doing this is completely outdated, and me noting, yeah, at least since 1943. There are also illustrations about this in other German World War II publications. Finally, a reminder about premature detonations. In overgrown terrain, there can be premature shell detonations, so stay away from the muzzle. So yeah, generally as a squishy infantryman, don't hang around armored vehicles.
Big thank you to the Panzermuseum Munster for inviting me. Thank you to my supporters on Patreon and Subscribestar. Thank you to Tobias and Andy for helping me out. Thank you for watching and see you next time.